Welcome to the next lecture of our course on environmental biotechnology, and in today's lecture we are going to learn about biological nitrogen removal, and in particular in this lecture we are going to discuss about the environmental problem with nitrogen, and we will also talk that a large part of this biologically available nitrogen remains untreated and ends up in the wastewater, and the concept of biological nitrogen removal and the possibility of recovering that nitrogen, particularly the conventional nitrogen removal and limitation of the conventional nitrogen removal will be discussed, and finally, the new paradigm of nitrogen removal will be explained. So, nitrogen is one of the most important nutrients in the biosphere, because it is used in the biosynthesis of proteins, nucleic acids and all other cell constituents. It is therefore considered as a macronutrient and is most frequently found as limiting for plant growth. So, that is a very important aspect of the nitrogen, because unless it is available to the plants in the form of oxidized or reduced species like ammonia or nitrate or nitrite, the plants in particular are unable to utilize the nitrogen, because nitrogen which is available in our planet is mostly the gaseous nitrogen, dinitrogen, which is considered to be mostly inert. And this nitrogen, which is so important for all the major biomolecules, it is actually responsible for the building blocks of all living organisms. So, be it the nucleic acid or is the protein. So, wherever we see these important molecules, it is all nitrogen. So, therefore, all cells must acquire nitrogen. Now, as the atmospheric nitrogen I mentioned is relatively inert, it does not react so readily with any kind of things that are those are biologically relevant and can produce biologically utilizable nitrogen forms. For most of the plants and animals, to utilize N, nitrogen must be converted to either ammonium or nitrate or the organic nitrogen, that is the urea. So, ideally, so this is the major role over here that we need to understand, that nitrogen which is present in the atmospheric gases needs to be converted to some form which can be utilized by the plants, and from the plants this will be distributed to all organisms, because plants are considered to be the producers of all the fixed carbon, and along with the carbon the nitrogen will also be assimilated, and through that it will enter into the food chain, and therefore, the nitrogen will move on. So, this nitrogen can be organic nitrogen, inorganic nitrogen, like it could be ammonia, it could be nitrate, it could be nitrite, it could be urea. So, either or it can assimilate as amino acids or protein molecules, of course. So, the responsibility of microorganisms who are capable of transforming this gaseous or so called inert nitrogen to useful form, mostly the ammonia, nitrate, nitrite and perhaps also urea, is coming next. So, these are the nitrogen fixing bacteria. So, basically the nitrogen fixing bacteria, they produce this, converts this nitrogen, atmospheric nitrogen into reduced nitrogen, and then the reduced nitrogen is assimilated, utilized by all organisms, and eventually it ends up into all living cells. So, all living cells on this planet, they get the nitrogen. So, from the atmospheric nitrogen to the nitrogen present in all the living cells, there is a very important part of nitrogen fixing bacteria, and followed by the carbon fixing autotrophic organisms. They allow the flow of the nitrogen. Now, if we look at the major biochemical processes of nitrogen cycle which are taking place in the environment, and because this is important, because by utilizing some of these processes we are able to manage the nitrogen which is emitted or released as a nitrogen waste, because we already learned that too much of nitrogen is bad for the environment. It's a responsible factor for what you call nutrient pollution. So, along with phosphate, excess nitrogen be it ammonical nitrogen or nitrate nitrogen or nitrite nitrogen or organic nitrogen. Too much of nitrogen is bad for the environment or any kind of ecosystem, because most of the ecosystem, in most of the ecosystem, it is the nitrogen who is another limiting factor. Okay. So, once we have that arrangement that extra nitrogen will be available to the biotic components, maybe through the waste effluents or contaminated waste materials or by other discharges in which nitrogen is there, then that will lead to eutrophication, possibly, that we have already discussed in some of our earlier classes. Now, in order to combat that situation, we are in environmental biotechnology, we are trying to take the advantage of the natural nitrogen cycling processes or natural processes in which microorganisms play the important roles in transferring or transforming nitrogen from one form to the other. Okay. So, now let us first see that what are the different transformation reactions which are carried out by the microorganism mostly. So, first we start with the dinitrogen. So, the dinitrogen in step 1 is reduced by ammonia, that is the function of the nitrogen fixing organisms which are naturally present in soil and other ecosystem. Now, this ammonia or ammonical nitrogen, which I marked as step 1, undergoes some series of reactions and eventually it ends up into nitrate. Now, this nitrate formation from ammonia, as you can understand that this is a kind of an oxidation process. It might be a two-step process and many a times it is a two-step process like nitritation, in which the ammonia is first oxidized to nitrite and then a nitration step in which the nitrite is converted to nitrate. So, eventually we get nitrogen to ammonia and then ammonia to nitrate. In between, the system also produces nitrite and nitrite can be substituted. So, there are multiple microorganisms who are capable of carrying out these functions. So, sometimes it is a only one organism might function for both the steps, or multiple organisms are involved, because these are two separate steps like 2A and 2B as I mentioned. So, ultimately ammonia is converted to nitrate. Now, this nitrate, which is a soluble form, again is present in the soil and water system, can have multiple fate. Fate number 1, that it is reduced into a kind of a process which is called assimilatory nitrate reduction, and it is entering into the cellular system as ammonical group or NH2 groups of the proteins or the amino acids. So, it enters into the cellular system, we call it assimilatory process or assimilation of nitrogen takes place, which actually utilizes the nitrate, reduces the nitrate into ammonia and ammonical ammonium NH2 groups or amino groups, and it is utilized. Alternatively, it could be also reduced to ammonia, which is basically the dissimilatory nitrate reducing process, in which the nitrate will be reduced by dissimilatory nitrate reducing or aspiring organisms, which will use it just as an electron acceptor, terminal electron acceptor in absence of oxygen, and will reduce it to ammonia, and this ammonia will be produced outside the cell. So, cell will not utilize this reduced ammonia. So, these are the two things, that one is the assimilatory nitrate reduction to ammonia and another is the dissimilatory nitrate reduction to ammonia. This ammonia leaves the system. There could be another way of reducing nitrate via NO2 and N2O and NO, which will finally lead to the production of nitrogen or dinitrogen. So, nitrate can be completely, we say, mineralized to nitrogen or dinitrogen, which can also leave the system. So, now if we want to think that we have a wastewater containing high amount of ammonia, possibly we can now understand that there are some microbial processes which might be useful in facilitating converting this ammonia into nitrate and then nitrate to nitrogen, and the nitrogen can leave the system. Alternatively, some form of the ammonia can be taken up directly by the cells, that is called the assimilatory process, which can assimilate the ammonia directly, or they can reduce the nitrate to ammonia and then use this nitrogen into the cell. So, in either of the ways the nitrogen will be assimilated inside the cell. So, some fraction of the nitrogen which is available will be ultimately assimilated, but most of the nitrogen will potentially be converted to either ammonia or to nitrogen, and both this ammonia and nitrogen can be released outside. And so, from a wastewater point of view, the waste will have reduced nitrogen under that circumstances. Now, these are the following are the major processes that possibly are we found that, and regarding the denitrification and NMOX and ammonification and ammonia assimilation, we will briefly discuss about them in subsequent slides. So, essentially these are the processes what we found, that nitrogen to ammonia, which is the job of the nitrogen fixers or nitrogen fixing bacteria. Then ammonia is oxidized to nitrate via nitrite. So, these are the what you called ammonia oxidizing bacteria. Then we have nitrogen to nitrate, it could be a single species or it could be multiple species. Then you have the nitrate assimilatory reduction to ammonia, and this ammonical nitrogen will be taken up by the cells, or nitrate could be reduced so to ammonia which will be released outside, this is called dissimilatory reduction. Alternatively, nitrate could be reduced completely to nitrogen, which is called denitrification. For soil, for example, denitrification is not a good one, because that will reduce the soil nitrogen, but for a wastewater treatment process this denitrification could be very useful, because there we will be able to reduce or diminish the nitrogen content of the water. There could be another process also converting ammonia to nitrogen through NO2, that is called the NMOX process. We can have also the ammonification and ammonia assimilation by the cells. Now, the environmental problem with nitrogen, why nitrogen is a concern. I mentioned earlier that nitrogen could be a typical nutrient pollution, it can lead to nutrient pollution, because a large part of the biologically available nitrogen remains untreated and ends up in the wastewater. So, unless we have some treatment processes, nitrogen is released from all kind of waste, through the fecal materials and all other organismic waste. So, all organisms they discharge these different forms of nitrogen, and this nitrogen ends up along with the industrial processes into the wastewater and our river and all these things. In addition to that, there are agricultural activities which are also responsible, because in agricultural sector we often use huge amount of nitrogen fertilizer, and those fertilizers etc. remain unused by the soil microbiota and the plants, and during the runoff with excess water, this or during the normal agricultural processes also, this nitrogen ends up into the groundwater or the nearby water bodies. So, there is a recent study from Canadian systems that the nitrogen loading in terms of 10 to the power 3 tons per year is presented, and that nitrogen which is amounted to like 1000 tons per year unit to the surface water and groundwater. And you can see that the contribution from different components are there, but the most significant is the agricultural field. It is around 300,000 tons per year nitrogen being unnecessarily added into the system. That is entering into the system, and then that is moving into the groundwater, moving into the water bodies and moving into all around the system, along with the atmospheric deposition, industrial activities and municipal waste treatment plants. So, all around these activities we have sufficient or very high amount of nitrogen which is added into the environment, and when it ends up into some sinks like a groundwater system or in aquatic habitats, more importantly, it leads to severe environmental deterioration. Now, enhanced nitrogen causes serious environmental problems. What are these problems? One of the most severe consequences is the eutrophication, where we see that excessive amount of nitrogen, for example, the nutrient the nitrogen as well as the phosphate, a lake or other water bodies, causes a dense growth of aquatic plant life like algae, followed by other higher macrophytes and other organisms. Toxic algal bloom is another severe problem, because when you have this extra nitrate along with phosphate, that promotes the growth of the algae, decline, reduces the oxygen, because during the night time the algae respires using the dissolved oxygen. So, as the water level oxygen level drops, the indwelling organisms, fish and other aquatic animals, they start dying, and including the other organisms, the microbes which require the oxygen. After the bloom dies also, the algal bloom, when it dead, the microbes decomposes the dead algae with remaining oxygen being consumed, that generates basically a dead zone, and formation of the dead zone in the sedimentary region or in the below water region causes all the fish and other aquatic animals to die off. And when these depleted oxygen zones cover a large area for an extended period, neither fish nor plants can survive in that. So, that those ecosystems are completely degraded and deteriorated eventually, and many other undesirable activities, natural activities start occurring in those places. So, it actually spoils the entire ecosystem of the aquatic bodies mainly. In groundwater also it contaminates, and it actually perturbs with the normal groundwater microbial and biogeochemical activities, and it also leads to the global warming by N2O gas, for example, which is produced during denitrification process and is responsible for the global warming. So, overall nitrogen is a problematic nutrient. It is a nutrient at low concentration, but when it is there is a higher concentration, unnecessarily it causes severe problem. So, therefore, nitrogen removal from wastewater is found to be extremely important, because within the wastewater the things are under our control. So, we like a phosphate enhanced phosphate removal process or phosphorus removal process, scientists have developed the enhanced nitrogen removal process. Now, two strategies of nitrogen removal can be envisaged. One is, as I mentioned earlier, that nitrogen, ammonical nitrogen or nitrate or nitrite nitrogen can convert to dinitrogen, and dinitrogen is a gaseous form. So, it leaves the system. So, any kind of nitrogen which is there in your wastewater can be converted to N2, and N2 will leave the system. The other one is you convert the nitrogen into fertilizer and then reuse it, try to use that as a nitrogen fertilizer. And nitrogen fertilizer, however, is an energy intensive process, and it is considered to be 1 to 2% of global energy is consumed during the production of fertilizer from different nitrogen compounds. Now, here if we look at the biological and the chemical processes of nitrogen removal, you can convert the chemically, you can convert the nitrogen into fertilizer, you can convert the nitrogen also to dinitrogen chemically, you can also convert biologically. Now, sometime the nitrogen content in the wastewater gets diluted. So, if it is very much diluted, then it would be difficult and energy intensive to recover via the physical or chemical processes. Sometimes we adopt physico-chemical processes for recovering nitrogen when it is cost effective, but in that case the nitrogen concentration should be higher. But if the nitrogen concentration is low because the wastewater is diluted, then it is not very efficient process. Also, the biological waste treatment is the new paradigm in wastewater treatment, which causes the enhanced nitrogen recovery and also the reduction in the cost, energy cost, particularly the energy expenditure for the entire process. Now, what happens if we think of a nitrogen removal from wastewater using microbial process or biological process? So, here biological processes refers to mainly the microbiological processes. Now, the conventional nitrogen removal is presented over here, and in this process you can see the wastewater goes through two processes, which is one is called the nitrification and then the denitrification process. So, I will explain them step by step. So, you have the wastewater full of ammonia. This is the one of the most prominent form of nitrogen, reduced nitrogen present in the wastewater or waste effluent. So, you can convert this ammonia into nitrate, that is called nitrification. It is a two-step process in which first the nitration occurs, that is an ammonia is converted to nitrite, and then the nitrite is further oxidized to nitrate. So, first we oxidize the ammonia to nitrate, and then we allow the nitrate to be reduced to nitrogen, that is called the denitrification, again via the nitrite only. So, it is actually having a common intermediate, that is called the nitrite. In one side we are using ammonia to subject the ammonia to the ammonia oxidizing bacteria and producing the nitrite through nitration, and then the nitration nitrate which is produced, a nitrite which is produced is further oxidized to nitrate, and the other way we are converting the back the nitrate to nitrogen via the nitrite again. So, these are the two prominent processes which are coupled. So, because first the ammonia has to be converted to nitrate and the nitrate will be denitrified, because most of the microbes which actually converts this ammonia to nitrite, they some of them or they live along with the organisms which are able to perform this nitration and nitration will allow the nitrite to be further oxidized to nitrate. Now, nitrification is a biological oxidation, rather is a microbiological process of oxidizing ammonia or ammonical nitrogen to nitrite, followed by oxidation of nitrite to nitrate. So, it is basically two step reaction, and if we look at the detail of the process of the electron transfer, we see that it has actually very interesting step in which the ammonia reacts with the oxygen and it is converted to this hydroxylamine. The hydroxylamine actually enters into the periplasmic space, where this hydroxylamine oxidoreductase enzyme, which is responsible for oxidizing these further to the NO2, and then the NO2 will be further subjected to transformation reaction. Now, the oxidation of ammonia or the ammonical nitrogen to NO2 is done by the ammonia oxidizing bacteria or AOB. So, this is the first phase of the reaction, where ammonia is converted by the ammonia monooxygenase enzyme AMO and the hydroxylamine oxidoreductase HAO. So, the two enzymes are involved in these ammonia oxidizing microbes. They have these two enzymes and they are able to convert this ammonia to nitrite, and these bacteria are mostly identified as Nitrobacter species, Nitrococcus, Nitrospina and Nitrospira like members. Now, in the second step, the nitrite is converted to nitrate by the nitrifying bacteria, in which we can see again that the nitrite is further converted to nitrate with the use of the electron transport system, and we can use this some of the protons which are actually generated out of the proton motive force can be utilized in terms of the proton motive force, and we can generate ATP out of it. So, the microorganisms who are responsible for this get some energy benefit out of this. So, they are capable of doing this. Now, the enzyme which is responsible for this process is called nitrite oxidoreductase, and you can see this nitrite oxidoreductase is capable of oxidizing the nitrite to nitrate, and the organisms like Nitrosomonas and the Archaea nitrosopumilus are found to be responsible for carrying out specifically this step of the nitrite oxidation to nitrate. Now, there is also another process which is called denitrification. So, the nitrate which is produced will be converted to nitrogen. That is the final step where we want to remove the nitrogen. So, ammonia to nitrate and then nitrate will be denitrified to nitrogen. Now, nitrification process involves the reduction of the nitrate to nitrogen through a series of intermediate gaseous nitrogen oxide products, and the intermediate nitrogen oxide products are, for example, NO2, nitrite oxides like NO and nitrous oxide N2O. Some of them are important for as an environmental pollutants as well. Now, this process is performed primarily by heterotrophic bacteria, but autotrophic bacteria like the Thiobacillus denitrificans etc., are also found to be involved. Among the heterotrophic microorganisms capable of denitrifying, that is converting this nitrate to nitrogen, which is ultimately providing the solution to this nitrogen problem, is catalyzed by the organisms like Paracoccus denitrificans or Pseudomonas like organisms. So, here is the process of denitrification through electron transport chain, and you can see that the nitrate which is eventually been reduced in a multiple steps by the electron carrier complexes, which are also acting as the oxidoreductase enzymes, and they are all located on the membrane where electron transport processes are going on, and they are highly dependent on the supply of the reducing power or the electrons from NADH H+. Now, this reaction is catalyzed by the primarily by nitrate reductase NAR nitrite reductase NIR, nitrite oxide reductase NOR and N2O reductase. So, number of reductases are there, because it is a multi-step process where nitrate will be eventually reduced to nitrogen. We cannot reduce directly a nitrate to nitrogen, it has to be done in multiple steps. So, multiple oxidoreductase enzymes are used, who are located distinctly within the electron transport chain, and the organisms like Paracoccus or Pseudomonas who are capable of performing these reactions, they have all these enzymes through which they utilize this nitrate as electron acceptor, often during this denitrification process. Now, so we have understood that possibly this is one of the means that through which the nitrogen can potentially be removed, that you have this ammonia which is present in the wastewater. So, your wastewater must be having lots of ammonia. So, that will be initially converted to nitrate, and then the nitrate will be converted to nitrogen. So, here first you have the nitrification process and then you have the denitrification process. So, ultimately the denitrification. So, first part is oxidative process and the second part is reductive process, and a separate set of microorganisms are involved for these two distinct phases of the reactions. Now, the intermediates, for example, the N2O, which is responsible for causing a ozone layer depletion, has been reported. So, these are some of the important limitations that we are right now highlighting, that the N2O causes the ozone layer depletion and responsible for global warming. So, that is the intermediate somewhere here in the nitrate reduction. So, nitrification requires energy intensive aeration, like the oxidation of ammonia to nitrate. In between we have the nitrite as well. So, we need supply of oxygen aeration. So, BNR, biological nitrogen removal, increases the energy for aeration, pumping and solid processing, because lot of biomass growth will be there and those needs to be separated out. Less organic carbon source in wastewater for denitrification affects the nitrogen removal efficiency negatively. So, basically nitrate reducing bacteria, most of them they are heterotrophs. So, they need the supply of electrons, because here we are trying to reduce nitrate, and this reduction of nitrate would essentially means that there will be a supply of electron donor, and these electron and carbon donors are the heterotrophic organisms. They utilize the, or through the heterotrophic organisms they utilize the organic carbon which is present. So, if the organic carbon concentration of the wastewater is low, then possibly the denitrification process will suffer. Now, we will talk about the new paradigm of nitrogen removal. So, we identified that this could be ammonia to nitrate and nitrate to nitrogen could be a affordable process, but there are certain technical issues and issues related to the energy expenditure in particular. Also, the presence of N2O, which is considered to be a major concern of the from the global warming point of view, as a greenhouse considered to be an important component. Now, the full nitrification requires 4.57 milligram oxygen per milligram nitrogen, but nitration requires only 3.43 milligram, because it goes via nitrite. So, denitrification rates occur 1.5 to 2 times faster than the denitrification, and the organic carbon requirement is up to 40% less. So, there could be some strategies. So, denitrifiers can use nitrite or nitrate as their electron acceptor. That means, the organisms who are considered as denitrifier. So, the denitrifiers are those who are reducing this nitrate to NO2 and then possibly to nitrogen. So, most of them who are reducing nitrate can reduce nitrite also. Now, why we are focusing on nitrite, or we are thinking of focusing on nitrite? Because nitrite can directly be produced from ammonia. Because if we look carefully, when ammonia is oxidized by AOB, ammonia oxidizing bacteria, nitrite is produced and then the nitrite is further oxidized to nitrate. So, one of the alternatives coming up, that instead of oxidizing it up to nitrate, if we just oxidize up to nitrite and then allow the nitrite to be converted to nitrogen, then that could actually help us, because suppressing the nitration can save 20% of the aeration cost, because this part would otherwise require a lot of oxygen, because nitrite to nitrate is an oxidation process. So, if we stop this, lot of savings will come in terms of the aeration cost. Also, the sludge production is reduced by 33% for the nitration and 55% for denitrification. So, the entire this way and this way two processes are actually reduced. So, one of the strategies that was planned and developed is that allow the conversion of ammonia to nitrite and then nitrite be converted to nitrogen. Now, the key to the successful biological nitrogen removal is basically enriching AOB, ammonia oxidizing bacteria, and inhibiting the nitrite oxidizing bacteria, because we do not want nitrite to be oxidized to nitrate. Now, process for enriching AOB, ammonia oxidizing bacteria, so that ammonia will be converted to nitrite, and inhibiting the NOBs, that is the nitrite oxidizing bacteria. So, that we will stop the production of nitrate. Now, alternating the anoxic and oxic condition, that might help. Aggressive SRT control, step feeding and intermittent aeration, these were found to be useful. Now, NOB, that is the nitrite oxidizing bacterial activity, experiences a time lag due to the transition from the anoxic to oxic conditions. Intermittent aeration restricts the dissolved oxygen. It is more effective to limit the NOB activity, and AOB higher oxygen affinity for rather than to NOB, and it releases less N2O from the system and also less energy consuming process. The other aspect of this is the denitrifying polyphosphate accumulating organisms. During our enhanced biological or microbiological phosphate removal lecture, we have already learned that how this phosphate removing bacteria like Accumulibacter can actually accumulate large number of the polyphosphate bodies. Now, during that polyphosphate accumulating process, many of these bacteria, they under the anoxic growth, they actually can use nitrate as their electron acceptor if the oxygen level is slightly lower, and they actually consume the nitrate, and they also accumulate the phosphate which is present there as a polyphosphate bodies. So, that is another option, that during the process of the enhanced phosphorus removal, we can actually integrate the process of denitrification also, or encouraging those organisms including Accumulibacter for example, which can serve both the purposes of removing nitrogen as well as the phosphate. The second one is the partial nitritation with anamox, that is abbreviated as PNA, partial nitritation with anamox. Now, in current applications, about half of the ammonia is oxidized by ammonia oxidizing bacteria to NO2. Anamox is a system or a type of organisms which catalyze the oxidation of the rest of the ammonia which is there anaerobically, so that the complete ammonia is oxidized. So, half of the ammonia which is present there is oxidized to by the aerobic ammonia oxidizing bacteria or AOB to nitrite. So, remaining half of the ammonia can be oxidized under anaerobic condition, and that oxidation takes the advantage of having nitrite in the system, because nitrite would anyway be there, because ammonia, when you oxidize aerobically, ammonia is converted to NO2, and then that NO2 can be utilized by this ammonia oxidizing anaerobic bacteria to produce nitrogen. So, here is the anamox process. You can see that ammonia is oxidized anaerobically with nitrite as the electron acceptor in the anamox reaction, forming nitrogen as the final product, and these are the reaction steps. So, it has multiple intermediates through hydrazine, and you can see the name of the enzymes also, like nitrites reductase, hydrazine synthase and hydrazine dehydrogenase, and the bacteria that perform the anamox process are of versatile types, but most of the time these are the species which we found to be most frequent. The anamox bacteria all possess one anamoxosome, a lipid bilayer membrane bound compartment inside the cytoplasm, in which this anamox process generally takes place. Now, the advantage of this PNA over the conventional BNR processes are no organic carbon is required, fully autotrophic nitrogen removal, because it is distributed into two segments, about 60% less energy for aeration, because we are avoiding the synthesis of nitrate out of nitrite, about 75% less sludge production, and lower emission of CO2 and potentially the hazardous N2O, since both gases are not produced in NMOX metabolism. However, there are some challenges also associated with these processes, like COD to N ratio, which is important criteria. This might lead to an excess of heterotrophic growth, resulting in slowing down the NMOX process. Low ammonia load restrict the NMOX and AOB growth. Low temperature, effluent ammonia from mainstream needs to be much lower than from side stream. So, these are certain technical aspect and also certain important parameters for the microbiological and catalytic processes present there. And for that, some solutions have been developed by the environmental engineers and environmental biotechnologists, like the carbon can be removed ahead of PNA treatment, like hydrocarbon biodegradation, or how activated sludge treatment, or using the aerobic bacteria, heterotrophic bacteria to aerobic mostly to metabolize the carbon in presence of oxygen. Excess biomass also can be retained with a membrane bioreactor or biofilm granule system to compensate for lower NMOX activity associated with temperature and ammonia concentration. There is another process which is actually of concern to these engineers and environmental biotechnologists working towards biologically enhanced or biologically catalyzed nitrogen removal, is the COMA-MOX or complete ammonia oxidation. The COMA-MOX process involves the complete conversion of ammonia into nitrate by a single microorganism. So, the ammonia is directly converted to nitrate instead of nitrite. So, if you do not have this step, then possibly the scope of denitrification is also gone. So, you have to again come back all the way down here and then get into this nitrogen. So, the microorganisms who are performing the COMA-MOX belong to the mostly the genera Nitrospira, and these organisms, they show an extraordinary high affinity for ammonia. So, they cause the problem in PNA system, because they do not allow any ammonia to be left for any other activities, and this part oxidation then is not possible. It consumes more oxygen and it is enabling the cells to converting ammonia to nitrate, and then subsequently the nitrate will be denitrified. Now, emerging research strategies for PNAs will be discussed. One aspect is the ammonia oxidizing archaea, we call them AOA, which basically oxidize ammonia to NO2 like AOB, but they possess a higher affinity for ammonia and oxygen. So, they could be better suited for PNA with low effluent ammonia, and also nitrate dependent anaerobic methane oxidizing archaea that reduce the nitrate to NO2 with methane as an electron donor, which might offer a more reliable nitrite supply to NMOX than AOB and eliminates the requirement for NOB suppression. Recently, we see that there are developments with respect to bioelectrochemical systems for biological nitrogen removal from the wastewater, where we can see that the use of the anode and cathode, and we have the cation exchange membrane, which can allow the ammonia which is produced or present there can be moved into this cathodic chamber, and then if we raise the pH, for example, then most of the ammonia can be recovered from this system. And having this kind of a cation exchange membrane creates the ammonia gradient across the membrane, and the ammonia can be put in place into the cathode chamber, and it can be speciated into from the ammonium to ammonia, and the ammonia can be separated out easily. So, there are a couple of similar recent developments are also there. So, overall for this lecture we will be using these two references, and in conclusion, the concept of microbiological nitrogen removal is discussed. The processes, enzymes, microbes involved in the conventional nitrogen removal is highlighted, and also we have discussed about the new methods of the microbiological nitrogen removal. Thank you.